Okay, so here I'm going to go through some of the questions for 1.2, Part A. So a classic question. Steve is designing a digital camera. Explain why he needs secondary storage, and it's 2 marks. So you've got to make 2 points. So before you answer these questions, just think about what your 2 points are. I find that I do this, so just to let you know, I'm not telling you I'm perfect, but a lot of students just start writing and they waffle out an answer, fill out the box, and they go, right, the box is filled. I'm getting 2 marks. But what are your 2 points here? So the 2 points here is what does secondary storage, what benefit do you have of having secondary storage, and why specifically does digital camera need one? So secondary without secondary storage, the system will only store data in primary storage, which is volatile, and so all the data will be lost if the camera is turned off. Now, also that's one thing, but one other thing with secondary storage is, which just make sure, going to put something like that. Now, another thing about secondary storage is that it's large, much larger than primary storage by default. So secondary storage is much larger than primary storage, and a digital camera needs lots of space. So that's another reason. Even if you didn't turn the camera off, you still wouldn't be able to take a lot of pictures without secondary storage, unless you've got masses of RAM. But even then, not good quality pictures. So there's my 2 points there. One, that we need secondary storage because primary storage is volatile, and 2, that secondary storage is much larger than primary storage, and a digital camera needs lots of space. Try to always refer back to the question. Specific. Don't guess that they're going to presume. Here's an example of a question. I think we had one where there was some currency. I don't know if I did this for your class, but there was currency, and it said in like the test, what's a good format for this data type? And it had a list of ones, and people listed all the ones that it wasn't. They said, well, it shouldn't be an integer, it shouldn't be a boolean, it should be a float. But it was 2 marks, and I only got 1 mark because yes, you picked float, but it was why. And the reason a float is good for a currency is because currencies have decimal places. I know that's obvious, and you're thinking that's obvious, but at the end of the day, that's how mark schemes work. So you just got to roll with it. So here, the computer will only have 2 gig of RAM, but Alicia says that virtual memory can be used instead of adding more RAM. Explain how virtual memory can compensate for lack of RAM in Alicia's computer. Right, so there's 3 points here. So we're going to do point 1. Explain virtual memory. Okay, mark 1. Point 2, how does this compensate for lack of RAM? And then point 3, examples in Alicia's computer. So here we go. Virtual memory is where the computer moves data from RAM onto the secondary storage. I'm going to put moves unused data from RAM on secondary storage in a paging file, thus freeing up RAM for other purposes. Right? If we do not have enough RAM, this allows the computer to load more programs by parking unused ones until later on. Right, so that's basically what virtual RAM is. I'm just going to delete these 2, or at least I'll delete that, and then shrink these. If Alicia was loading a new program, like Word, but she had no RAM, then the operating system would move suspected unused information to the secondary storage, freeing up RAM for her program. All right, there we go. That's that. 3 marks. Bang. 1, 2, 3. Explain why it would be beneficial for Alicia to get more RAM instead of relying on virtual memory. Okay, so this one's quite obvious. Virtual memory is slow. Secondary storage is slow. But you've got to state that. This is the problem. So the point here is slower and then sort of why, really, basically. Why is it slower? So the fact that it's slower and why is it slower are your 2 marks, right? Virtual memory is much slower than RAM. So, because don't forget, it says, why would it be beneficial? So you can't just explain why it's bad to use virtual memory. You've got to explain why it's good to have more memory. See? So the RAM. So it is not as fast as primary RAM. Primary storage RAM. It is therefore better to have more RAM, as we are then less likely to use virtual memory to require the use of virtual memory. So I've said about why it's have more RAM, because, you know, if you want to state why it's better to have more RAM, as we are then less likely to use virtual memory. I'll probably then add a little bit just to make sure I get the marks. Virtual memory is slower because it uses the slower secondary storage, SSD or hard. Probably SSD or hard disk drive. There we go. So virtual memory is much slower than RAM, so it's not as fast as primary storage RAM. Actually, that's a terrible sentence. It's much slower than RAM slower than the primary storage of RAM. There we go. It is therefore better to have more RAM, as we're less likely to require this virtual memory. Try to answer the question. It's very easy there to explain, get 1 mark, to explain that virtual memory bad, brilliant. It's really slow. Yeah, virtual memory is slow because of this reason, brilliant. So why is having more RAM better then? Because we're less likely to use virtual memory if we have more RAM. Okay, this is another classic question. Explain why solid state is the correct secondary storage format choice for mobile MP3 player. 3 marks. Right. Everyone gets caught out here and they get like 1 or 2 marks. The 3 points are, why is solid state good? Right, this is the point. Why is solid state good? But the thing is, all 3 marks are that, really. Now, these are the reasons that you want to put. No moving parts, so very durable. Oh, I'll put very reliable when moving. Okay, because it's got no moving parts in it, you can move it around, right? Large capacity. Everyone forgets that. Part of the secondary state solid state drive, you're not just saying why is a solid state drive better than a hard disk drive, which is what you're thinking in your head. It's actually why is it just a acceptable choice, and it's also acceptable choice because it has a large capacity. Okay, and they're very durable. Basically, if you drop them, they can be broken. No moving parts, no moving parts. My typing is shocking. There we go. But they're your 3. You could just write that, but obviously put them into a sentence. Make sure you're mentioning the fact that large capacity, which is required for an MP3 player. Yeah, because you might have thousands and thousands of songs, as you have lots of songs or albums. Yeah, so you might have a large amount moving, and an MP3 player will be moved around. You know, you could just, you know, very durable, which is good, as an MP3 player could be easily dropped. There we go. They're your 3 points. You merge them together, put the word solid state a bit. Solid state drives have no moving parts, so they are very reliable when moving, and then MP3 moved around. Large capacity, which is required for MP3 players. Have lots of songs, albums. Very durable, which is good. MP3 player could be easily dropped. 1, 2, 3. I know it's annoying every time, but I would actually have a piece of paper next to you and just very quickly jot out the points. Or if you finish the exam, you're sitting there, start marking yourself. Start saying, where are my 3 points here? Am I getting 1 point for that? 1 point for that and 1 point for that? Start thinking about your points. Like, where am I getting these 3 points from? Because I've got to make 3 different things, okay? So hopefully that'll help you answering the questions.